Welcome back. We're here with Jay, who is a sales and leadership coach. He's also the host for the Leading Lessons podcast. Jay, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm excited to return the favor. I was on yours, so I'm very excited for you to come on mine. So thank you so much.
Easton, it's an honor to be part of this conversation, man. I love the conversation we had on my podcast, and I just had to return it, right? I had to give that give and take.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. So we're gonna jump right into it. How important is authenticity when it comes to sales?
Easton, I get asked this question all the time because I think historically people think that sales is about manipulating people, about
Yes.
trying to change someone's perspective. If you aren't yourself when you're in front of a customer, if you're not yourself in front of a potential partner or something like that, they're going to see right through it, right? People have that thought process in their own mind of who's this person in front of me, and they can see right through the BS be completely transparent. So if that person in front of you cannot see that you're being 100% genuine, 100% authentic with who you are and what you're trying to get across, but also that you're there to help them, that entire relationship's going to deteriorate before it even gets built. It's the core fundamentals of sales, in my opinion.
I think it's very difficult as especially me and you have grown up with the Wolf of Wall Street. We've grown up with all these type of influences of like sales has to be cutthroat, sales has to be super, tacky or super just like m- manipulate your grandma out of a pension. So I think it is necessary, but I think in this day and age, it's kind of expected to be. Oh, you walk into a car dealership, you're going to get sold. You use all these tactics. So how do you go about training people on sales and provide them the correct tools while also having them keep their authentic self?
Easton, you actually kind of made me remember a quick story about one of the first cars I ever bought, right? I went into a dealership and I had a specific budget. I had a specific car in mind. I already had done all my research. I was that customer. And as soon as I walked into that dealership, the entire feeling of what I was about to experience completely flipped. I went in there confident and I left completely broken, right? I had a terrible experience with the sales associate, had a terrible experience with the sales manager because I knew that they did not actually care about me whatsoever. So when I'm coaching somebody on how to be an effective salesperson, I first have to teach them to be an effective person. They have to be able to communicate their pure mission, their pure intentions with somebody and actually mean it, because it just like I don't ever try to sell a product to somebody that doesn't need it or want it. I never try to coach somebody that I cannot break out of, oh, that schemy mindset, trying to take advantage or trying to manipulate people into getting their way, because people can smell that commission breath, especially nowadays. I think Wolf of Wall Street, one of my favorite movies of all time, and I think that Jordan Belfort has some amazing sales tactics and principles that he discusses in his trainings. But from I think that has shaped the perspective of a lot of people when they're buying something, whether it's cars, insurance, house, whatever it is. So just I always lead with, hey, how do you communicate with your friends and family that you have their best intentions in mind, and replicate that same behavior when you're in front of a client?
And how much do you think listening plays a part to actually closing a sale?
I mean, that's just the core, right? If you, I never can offer a solution if I don't know what the problem is, and if I'm just yapping my mouth the entire time trying to sell a product, I might not even be talking about what's going to be relevant for my client or my partner or whoever it is that I'm trying to talk to at that specific time. And sales is everywhere, right? If anybody ever says like, "Oh, I'm not a salesperson," well, if you've ever interviewed for a job, you're in sales. If you've ever had to convince your partner that you want one meal over another meal, you're in sales. If you've ever, dated, you're in sales in some capacity, because it's all about that communication and relationship building aspect of their life. If you don't listen to what that person across the table from you has to say, then you're never going to find a compromise. You're going to constantly be finding that sales friction or that friction in that interaction that's going to prevent you from compromising. And sales is compromising, whether they're compromising to buy your product or you're compromising on a different solution for them. It's the same thing.
And one of the other things like that you also coach on is not only the sales, but you also cover leadership. Do
Hmm.
you think leadership is something that you are born with, or this is something that you can learn like as a human over the years?
I think inherently there's some people with better aptitude of leadership, whether it's because of their upbringing, but that leads into the nature versus nurture conversation. I think that the best leaders are people that had a strong leader in their life when they were growing up and they saw those principles being emulated in the day to day, because leadership doesn't start at the position, it starts at your behaviors and your habits that you enact from day one. If you watch, I'll use parents for example. If you watch a strong male figure in your home lead the family through prayer on a regular basis, provide for the family on a regular basis, show up for the family on a regular basis, there's a good chance that that son or daughter is going to start emulating those behaviors because they're idolizing that leader into their life. So I personally believe that everybody has an ability to become a leader. It's just whether they're willing to or not. Because everybody thinks that leadership is, sunshine, rainbows, and it's the easy job. But in reality, you have to be the best at everything, and you're always going to be under a microscope for the rest of your life. And a lot of people aren't ready for that focus, that spotlight per se.
And what are those little habits that you think people can start to do today if they are looking to become a good leader?
Great question. I actually was speaking to one of my mentors recently about this, and he's a very successful entrepreneur. He's built and sold multiple businesses. He's the epitome of what it means to, start from nothing and build from the ground up. And he and I were discussing that it starts with how you start your day. Are you a person that sleeps in that extra 20, 30 minutes, or are you getting up right when your alarm goes off or before your alarm goes off? Are you the person that lets your bed stay messy all day, or are you the one that or are you the person that's going to actually put together your room before you exit? Are you the person that skips your morning breakfast and just takes a coffee on the way out, or are you fueling your body to take care of it? Because at the end of the day, you have to have clear mind, body, and spirit. If you're not feeling your body from the very beginning of the day, well, that's going to break down everything else. You become ornery, you become argumentative, you just become short with people. So it's those little things of taking care of yourself to make sure that you're in a perspective that you can take care of others, because when you do have that fire drill that gets blown up in front of your face 15 minutes into your day, if you did not ground yourself, you're not going to be able to handle that situation appropriately.
Yeah. Yeah, I think being able to handle like you mentioned, setting yourself to be able to handle pressure. If you're not doing this stuff outside of work or outside of business to then ground yourself when something comes in, you're already going to be scatterbrained. You're already going to be all over the place and probably not even focused on the problem that is in front of you.
Right. It, if your mind is not 100% devoted to whatever you're focusing on, it's going to crash and burn. And yes, I understand everybody has a thousand things going on in their life. They have personal life, they have professional life, they have this, they have that, they have their great grievances. But the fact of the matter is, when you're a leader, you have to show up for your people. Your people
Yeah.
should be the number one thing in your life. And your people could be your family. Your people could be the people that are at work, the people that you're managing on a day to day basis. It doesn't matter. I'm not saying you have to put yourself second. You should always prioritize yourself in terms of your health and your wellness and things like that. But that's actually to prepare you to be able to show up for the people in your life.
And what advice, like the other side of being a leader is having crucial conversations and having
Absolutely.
those difficult conversations that you get that feeling and you're like, I do not want to have this conversation. What advice would you give to someone that is struggling to start those difficult conversations with people?
That's a really good question, because for a very long time, I was that person that avoided those difficult conversations. I didn't, I tend in the past to have more of a people pleasing tendency where I don't want to hurt someone's feelings. I want to make them feel, welcome and feel support and things like that. But sometimes you just have to rip off the band-aid. So to get started having those conversations, it's understanding why you need to have it in the first place. Don't have a difficult conversation if you're not 100% prepared to actually carry it through anyway. Don't go into that meeting without the facts. Don't go into that meeting or conversation without at least What are you trying to get out of it? What is your goal out of this conversation, and how can you grow out of it with that person? Not every difficult conversation has to lead in termination or lead in a breakup or lead in whatever the worst case scenario is. Sometimes you can find value in hearing the other person's perspective, but understanding, hey, it's not going to get easier by waiting to have this
Yeah.
conversation. You're just delaying the inevitable, and time is only going to compound the effect, and it's only going to get worse in time. So just have the conversation, because I've read a statistic that I think it's like 85% of things that people have anxiety about and that stress about never happen. The worst case scenario in someone's mind never happens. So why are you putting all your eggs in the worst case scenario basket that's not going to happen versus just jumping headfirst into it after you do your research, after you make sure that you compile your thoughts, how you want to articulate it to better that relationship at the end of the day.
So you would say going in with a how do we both benefit? What's the main goal type of perspective is the best instead of being like I'm right, you're wrong type of type of perspective.
Well, it's just like a sale, in my opinion, right? Before I can start giving you options and giving you my perspective, I need to understand your perspective because we might be saying the same exact thing, but be articulating in a slightly different way. So every difficult conversation I start at is, hey, this happened. What was your perspective of this? Why do you think we got to here? How do you think it could have gone differently? Because a lot of times they're going to give me all the information that I already want to share with them anyway. Most people have enough cognition to understand when something went wrong, and they don't like that conflict either. So sometimes by you starting the conversation
Yes.
and the opportunity to move past it, it actually takes that burden off of them, which allows that relationship to continue building from there.
Yeah, I've realized that a lot when I bring up these difficult conversations. A lot of the time, it just is all about starting the conversation, and then once the conversation started, it's actually a very good conversation that's productive, that's
Mhm.
enjoyable. But it's just getting past that starting stage of like I don't want to do this. Let's start it, and it's usually really good as you go on in the conversation and very productive. It actually usually solves something.
Mhm.
Um, so
It
yeah,
it's just like back when you were a kid and you get a bad grade on a test. Like you avoid everything that you can to talk to your parents about it, but
yeah,
at the end of the day, most parents understand, like, yeah, that's not ideal, but how can we move past this? Like, what did you learn from this? There's a lot of my entire podcast is all about lessons people learn through mistakes and failures along the way. 9 times out of 10, that failure or that conflict or that bad situation led to something positive on the back end. You just have to allow that opportunity to catch up.
yeah. Now I want to move on to covering your podcast.
Absolutely.
How do you go about crafting deep quality questions for your guests?
So I always think about how can I add the most value to the audience, whether it's my audience or my guest audience, because I always want to add value and allow my guests to showcase their experience, showcase their expertise, showcase their story. I'm a huge proponent of bringing people onto my podcast that have a unique and inspirational or different story that they have just not had the platform or opportunity to share with other people. I've had the opportunity to meet with people that have built multi-million dollar businesses. I've had the opportunity to speak to artists across the world. I've had the opportunity to speak to people that are suffering from different disabilities, both mental and physical, and all the different aspects of of their businesses and what they had to overcome. So I really like to have the opportunity of them leading the conversation through their experiences, but I always have the underlying purpose of what did they learn from it? What would they recommend for somebody if they are undergoing something similar or maybe the same? And most importantly, how did that story, how did that experience transform the rest of their career? What was the byproduct? This happened, but where are we today?
Yeah.
So I just really like to have a conversation about the real things. I'm not a cookie cutter question guy. I'm not somebody that it's going to use a lot of fluff. I'm going to ask you the hard question and let you tell your perspective because I don't think that we ever, I once was told by a leader, no good get conversation or no good story ever started with a glass of water. And granted, there's a backstory behind that as well. But, sometimes the best stories are when people are a little liquored up. They have disagreements, whether it's politically or religiously or relationally or whatever it is. They have different perspectives, but because they brought down that barrier, asked the hard question, the uncomfortable conversation happened, which allowed them to grow and flourish that relationship from that point forward. So I guess my biggest advice when it comes to that is ask the question that other people are not asking
Yeah.
to get their perspective.
And I think when you're crafting just a podcast in general, one of the most important things is making sure it flows,
Mm-hmm.
making sure there's not dead space. There's the conversation is continuing. Can you talk about, I guess, your art of being able to continue a conversation even when it gets stale?
So I always have like an idea of what I want to get out of it and what kind of messaging the person wants to get that I want the message person to be sharing about their experience. But I also like to kind of probe them and be like, hey, listen, what are a couple things you're passionate about? What are some things that you like to talk about? And then from there, as they're telling their story, I'm going to pick up on one or two things they're specifically lighting up about. And then from there, I can use that and just be like, hey, tell me more about that. What do you mean by that? Give me a different perspective on that. How do you think that's transformed X, Y, and Z? Because when people talk about something they're passionate about, there is no dead space
Yeah.
because they're filling it with so much rich content between the lines.
So you would say it's all about picking up on what they actually want to talk about and then doubling down on that and just making sure they have a opportunity to share and dive deeper into things that they are passionate about.
Absolutely. Most of the time, the first thing someone says is not the actual like root thing that they're passionate about.
Yeah.
It's not until you get 2 to 3 layers down that you actually start seeing that fire and passion within somebody that when they're really talking about something they love. So I like to ask 2 or 3 questions deep every single opportunity. What do you mean by that? Tell me more about that. What was your experience with that? Because all of a sudden I go from a very boring, mundane story into something that's very deep rooted into their passions and love for whatever their industry is or their family or whatever it is, or even sometimes societal things that they've been fighting their entire life. I had an opportunity to talk to an individual on the West Coast. He actually was an immigrant from Egypt, right?
Wow.
His family was an immigrant from Egypt, and he grew up in 2001, right around 9/11, where he dealt with a lot of prejudice because he was of Arab descent. So I wanted to hear what was that experience like for him. And what he initially said was, yeah, it was difficult. Ended up being, well, it wasn't difficult for me. It was difficult for my family, and this is why. So I was able to dig into the real root cause and root meaning behind his experiences, which I think that's where the learning starts. The real deep story is what matters.
And has there been any very controversial takes that you didn't agree with on your podcast that kind of stand out to you?
Sure. I mean, I disagree with people all the time, but I believe in disagreeing respectfully, right? Just because you and I don't share the same exact take on something doesn't mean we can't still be friends at the end of the conversation.
No.
I remember during COVID, there was me and one of my closest friends of all time, very different sides of the political spectrum, very different sides of kind of societal policy, per se. And her and I ended up getting in kind of a screaming match over the policies that were in place at the specific time. And I remember just stepping back. I'm like, just because we disagree doesn't mean I don't love you. And I look at that with everybody I talk to. Just because you have a different perspective than me doesn't mean that I can't love you as a human being. Does not mean I can't be something in your life. And yeah, maybe we just avoid this conversation for until we're in a better mindset in a different place to discuss it. But I feel like so many relationships are ruined because of what seems like astronomical differences when a lot of the times the more different your perspectives, the actually closer you can become from that difference. I'm not
Yeah,
here to convince you. That's not my job, and you're not here to convince me. But how can we learn to cohabitate and coincide together? Because that's what matters. That's what life is made of.
Yeah, I think as humans, we go into relationships expecting the other person to fully agree with us or fully like our perspective. But when you look at humans, I don't even agree with everything that my mom and dad say.
Mhm.
So, like, how am I going to agree with a random stranger on the street? And I think we, as humans, the world would be a lot better if we got to this perspective of we can disagree and still be friends. Like, we don't have to like the same things. Like, we don't even
Mhm.
have to um, like the same people, and
Mhm.
we can still live and still, be in a happy place. Why do you think humans we struggle so much with being okay with not agreeing with like everything like the other people have to say?
I mean, that I think that goes back to nature versus nurture. It depends on the upbringing you have. If you were brought up in a world where there's constant conflict, where there's constant friction between your parental figures or the adult figures in your life, whether it was your grandma and mother or whatever the relationship was, whatever your hierarchy was, if all you've ever seen is disagreement and negative disagreement, then you're going to embody that for the rest of your life. A very, very close friend of mine grew up in a world where all it was conflict left and right. Parents didn't get along. Grandparents didn't get along. She was modeled after watching just negative conflict back and forth. And her behavior was always explosive, right? Everything she did was worst case scenario. She stubs her toe and blows up on the like my dog or something like that. It was
Yeah.
always ridiculous. And I remember asking her one day, I'm like, "Hey, just out of curiosity, why do you respond the way that you do?" It all drove back to what she was embodying because of her experiences. And I always try to think about that. Like, if I'm driving down the road and someone's, having road rage and they're yelling at me and doing this, that, the other, whatever it is. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, so it's going to happen all the time. If I'm seeing this, I also have to reflect back what's going on in that person's life, right? Did they just wake up on the wrong side of the bed? Did they forget their coffee this morning? Did they spill their coffee all over themselves? Every individual is their main character of their own story. And just because their negativity is in their life doesn't mean I have to bring it onto mine. And that's okay. But I feel like for a lot of people, the reason why we have such a hard time expressing our emotions is because societally, we have taught our children for generations now
Yes.
that it's not okay to talk about problems. It's not okay to share about what's happening within the home environment or the home ecosystem. We've taught these children to hide the truth. And I think all it's done is compound over years and years to teach people that it's not okay to disagree, and if you don't have my perspective, then we can't be friends.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's beautifully said. And I think as the youth, like just the youth in general, we're being pushed to kind of turn into robots. Like, don't express like what you want. Go with like what everyone else says. Don't don't be emotional, especially from a
Mhm.
man's perspective, especially like the teenagers. So
Mhm.
I think it is definitely detrimental to the youth because then people that kind of turns into like people aren't chasing what they're passionate about. People aren't expressing like what they're passionate about, and I think it's just a giant rabbit hole of that we could spend 30 minutes on just that one topic.
Right. And I still am a firm believer like your behavior is going to be embodied by the experiences you had. And that's why I'm such a proponent of the importance of living in a multi parental figure household. We see a lot of statistics that show that people that were raised only with one parent, they have a lot of emotional instability later in life. We see a lot of repeated behaviors, whether it comes from deviance, cheating, um, lying, just basic things that we all agree is not good. But we see that in households that people grew up with only a dad or only a mom, that gets repeated for years and years and years. And I think that if we solve that core, maybe not nuclear family, but that core two parental figure household problem that we have in America, because we have a lot of people that are being raised by single parents.
Yes,
If we solve that and we get people to stay in the household and give them both a maternal and paternal figure in the home, I think that will solve a lot of the longitudinal problems that we're seeing in the school systems and even in corporate America now, as people are aging into corporate roles.
I agree completely. Well, Jay, I have two more questions for you. If you passed away today, would you be happy with the life that you've built?
Wow, that's a heavy one. Um, I think I think my biggest purpose in life is making impact. If I can transform someone's life, even the slightest, one person, I had the purpose that I needed, that I was supposed to serve on this world. And I, as a faith, as my faith, as a follower of Jesus, I do believe that, my purpose is bigger than one day, is bigger than one person. I firmly believe it. But I think if I was to be taken today, I would hope that the people in my life say that I made a positive impact on them. And I think I did. But I don't think my work is done. I don't think my work will ever be done, because there's always going to be one more person I can impact, one more person I can touch, one more person I can connect to. And life is about connections. Life is about the people across from the table from you, is about how can I positively impact their life, because we have so much negativity in this world.
Yes,
We flip on the news, we flip on Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is, and 90% of it's negativity and just sound in life. And I think that what it comes down to is looking across the table at the people and, am I connecting with them? Am I making an impact? As a mentor once told me, are you adding or taking away to the people around you? And I hope that I've added to a lot of people in this world.
that's beautiful. I would say just in the 2 short months that I've known you, you are definitely doing that, especially with your passion of wanting to actually draw out people's true inspirations, true challenges, and then also sharing that with the world. So I would say you are definitely impacting people in a positive manner.
I appreciate that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh, dude, of course. I have one more question for you. If you could have dinner with two people, one person from the past and one person from the present, who would it be and why?
So, one person from the past, I would love to sit down for one more meal with my grandfather. He unfortunately was dual diagnosed both with dementia and ALS. So for the last 6 years of his life, he actually had no vocal ability whatsoever. He couldn't speak, he couldn't swallow, and at that time, I actually lived with him for about a year and a half. And I saw the love that he had for me that he could never express. So I would love to be able to sit down with him one more time and just have a candid conversation, having my grandfather for the first time, because, he passed when I was 11 years old. So it was very difficult for me to have a deep, meaningful conversation. And I look back and there's a lot of things that I could really use grandpa's take on, especially coming from his background, growing up how he did, growing up a military man. Now, from the present, I would really, really love the opportunity. That's a good one. I feel like the past might be easier, but I guess from the present, I'm a huge family man. So if I could, maybe not just one person, but maybe the family unit as a whole, being able to get all my nieces, my sister, my mom, my dad, my stepdad, everybody at one table and just share a meal together, that would mean a lot to me. It really would.
That's beautiful. I love those two answers. I always love when people pull the passed away family member because it would be beautiful just to have that one last conversation with them. So Jay, those are the questions I have for you. How can people find you, and what is one thing you want to leave people with?
Absolutely. So everybody can find me on Instagram, TikTok at Leading Lessons Podcast. So I post brand new episodes every Tuesday on YouTube and post short clips throughout the week with the different guests I bring on. Like I said, anything from leadership, entrepreneurship, business, sales. I bring people from all different industries. I have a couple of really interesting guests coming up, so I highly suggest everybody tune in for some of those special episodes. You can also find me on my consulting page, Jay the Sales Guy, on Instagram as well. Always feel free to DM me if you have any questions whatsoever. And what I always like to do is offer a free consultation discovery meeting with any business owner that is looking to uplift their sales, uplift their leadership, talk about sales processes, sales tactics. I'll do one free hour-long consultation to discover any potential needs that they may have within their business. And from there, I'll happily offer any suggestions that I have based on what some of their needs are.
Love it. And is there anything you want to leave people with?
My biggest thing is if you were thinking about doing something, just do it. The worst case scenario that you possibly could is you might lose a couple bucks, but you learn so many lessons along the way. You know, I started my Leading Lessons podcast with an idea about 6 years ago that I wanted to start a podcast. And it took 5 years for me to take action.
Wow.
And I think back to it now and I'm like, how far along could I have been if I started it back in 2019 when I initially thought about it? If you have an idea, take the risk and just do it. Because the worst case scenario that's probably sitting in your mind of what if, it's not going to happen. And you're going to learn a lot along the way.
Great advice. I think taking action is the number one thing, especially if you're fearful. So, Jay, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. If you want to stay in the room after and we can chat, I appreciate you for sharing not only your expertise but some of your personal struggles and just your stories on that as well. So, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, man. It was a great conversation.
It is a privilege and an honor, Easton. Thank you for having me.